Hi, and welcome to this video presentation for the Franklin Blvd Transformation Project. My name is Karen Mason, and I am a transportation planner with the City of Eugene. This presentation is an introduction to the Franklin Blvd Transformation Project, where we're at and how we got here. I'll be providing a brief project overview, discussing why this project is important, sharing what project-related public involvement has taken place, going over the current conceptual design and how it differs from the design last shared with the community in 2020, discussing roundabouts and what bike facilities are being proposed, and what can be expected looking ahead for this project. So let's dive into the project overview. As it exists today, Franklin Blvd can be an uninviting, unsafe, and uncomfortable street, and this is due in part to the wide lanes that enable vehicles to move fast, often above the speed limit. For people who walk, bike, or ride the bus, Franklin Blvd can be a significant barrier to getting from place to place. Because of this, fewer people choose to walk, bike, or take the bus to make connections to, from, and between the businesses and neighborhoods on and near Franklin. Fortunately, the future of Franklin Blvd is looking brighter. The Franklin Blvd Transformation Project is planning to redesign the Franklin corridor in ways that facilitate safe travel, meet the city's climate recovery goals, and encourage new development patterns along Franklin Blvd that serve as a more comfortable connector of places rather than a divider. The project area focuses on the length of Franklin that exists between Alder Street to the west and the I-5 overpass to the east. It also includes Garden Avenue. The planning phase for this project first began in 2019 with high-level design concept development, a process which has involved multiple rounds of public involvement. More on that later. Early in the process, with the help of the community, we created a purpose statement for the project, which is to transform Franklin from a street focused on moving automobiles to a safe, comfortable, and high-quality street designed for people walking, biking, and taking the bus, while also accommodating people who drive. To be consistent with adopted land use and transportation plans, and to be supportive of changes in urban form and mixed-use development. So why are we doing this? Why are we even looking at Franklin? We hit on it a bit in the purpose for this project. We're doing this to address safety, climate, and urban growth. We have adopted plans that address each of these topics. Our Vision Zero action plan identifies actions to eliminate all deaths and life-changing injuries that occur on our transportation system. The Climate Action Plan 2.0 lays out actions necessary in the realms of transportation, energy, and waste to achieve the city's climate recovery ordinance, which has greenhouse gas emission reduction targets. And the Walnut Station Specific Area Plan, which includes strategies for compatible infill, higher density living, and mixed-use development through a combination of land use and transportation planning and infrastructure investments. Safety for all people is a guiding tenet in all of the work that the city does. When it comes to our roads, 65% of all crashes in Eugene that result in a person dying or sustaining a life-changing injury, like a brain injury or a lost limb, occur on arterial roads. And in case you're wondering what an arterial road is, it's an urban road that carries a lot of traffic. Less than a highway, but more than a street that runs through your local neighborhood. Franklin Blvd is an arterial road. And in the 5-year period between 2016 and 2020, 79 crashes occurred along the stretch of corridor, one of which resulted in the death of a person who was walking across the street, and 2 resulted in life-changing injuries, including a person who was riding a bike. Redesigning Franklin will help us make sure that no person involved in a crash or collision at some point along the corridor dies or sustains a life-changing injury as a result of that collision. When discussing climate recovery, it's important to note that in Eugene, 53% of all greenhouse gas emissions come from the use of gasoline and diesel in transportation. A transformation of Franklin Boulevard that creates safe, continuous, easy to access space for people to walk, bike, roll, and use transit will help make it easier for people to use forms of transportation that don't require the same amount of gasoline or diesel use as a car being driven with only 1 or 2 people in it. So that in turn helps us meet our community goals towards climate recovery. And lastly, the area around Franklin Boulevard is growing and changing as we speak. Since planning for the Franklin transformation began in 2019, 3 new buildings have already opened their doors. The 959 Franklin Apartments, the Night Campus for Accelerating Scientific Impact, and the Hayward Inn. Additional developments are in the works both on and near the corridor, including additional apartment complexes, the redevelopment of the site where the Chevrolet dealership once was, known locally as the Romania lot or the Potato Chip Building, and the construction of a brand new mini district along the downtown riverfront. All of these developments are increasing the number of people who travel to or live on and near the corridor. They need to be able to move along and across the corridor to access jobs, education, grocery stores, pharmacies, parks, and more. A transformation of Franklin will help them and everyone else who uses the corridor to do so. In order for planning to transform Franklin to even begin, a couple of things have to happen first. Jurisdictional transfer of the street and the adoption of Eugene's 2035 Transportation System Plan. Because Franklin Boulevard is situated along parts of Oregon 99 and Oregon 126, decisions related to its form and operations were previously made by the Oregon Department of Transportation. But over the course of 12 years and 2 jurisdictional transfers, one in 2006 and one in 2018, ownership of the majority of the street was transferred from ODOT to the City of Eugene. Currently, ODOT ownership resumes approximately half a mile east of Walnut Street, which is in the vicinity of Riverview Street. Additionally, transportation adoption of the TSP gave city staff direction to, and I quote, examine options for improving bicycle and pedestrian access along Franklin Boulevard from the city limits to Alder Street and will be accomplished through a planning and as called for in the Walnut Station Mixed Use Center Plan. With the second jurisdictional transfer in place, staff were able to begin working on a plan to transform Franklin Boulevard. To put it shortly, planning work began in early 2019 and continues through to today in 2023. Initial planning and development of a high-level design concept involved 3 rounds of public engagement between 2019 and 2020. The result of that work was the gathering of much public feedback that informed and guided the selection of a preferred design, which then continued to being worked on and refined. But let's get into it a bit more and put it longly. From the get-go, we wanted to get as much insight and feedback from the community as possible to help guide this project. In January 2019, we held a 4-day-long design discovery workshop. On day 1, we shared the project with attendees, what it was, why we were doing it, and what we hoped to ultimately be able to deliver. A design for a new Franklin Boulevard that works for all people and all forms of transportation. We then broke the attendees up into groups and asked them to identify what was working on Franklin, what wasn't, and what their hopes were for a future Franklin. The meeting was recorded and live streamed on the UO channel and Facebook. On day 2, we held open studio hours where the community was invited to see the progression of design work. The afternoon open studio allowed Eugenians to see designers at work and peek at initial ideas for the corridor transformation. members of the public were able to chat with designers and provide comments on the initial designs. On day 3, we held interviews with representatives of different stakeholder groups, active transportation advocates, business and property owners, staff from LTD and the UO, and more. On the final day of the workshop, we held our first design reveal, where we showcased the week's design concept work. Designers presented a series of possible street cross sections and intersection designs, along with information about how options impact the way people traveling by different modes use the corridor. The event was a formal presentation with a structured question and answer section. After the workshop concluded, all information was posted online, and an online survey was open for several weeks asking the same questions on day 1 of the workshop. What's working? What's not? And what are you hoping for in a future Franklin? Taking everything we learned and accomplished during the January workshop, staff developed 3 possible corridor design alternatives that represented open house style in May of 2019. The first design alternative planned for all intersections to have roundabouts. The second design alternative planned for every intersection to be signalized. And the third design alternative was a hybrid combination of roundabouts and signals. When looking at the 3 design alternatives, staff looked at and evaluated various trade-offs and selection criteria, such as how did each design alternative impact traffic flow, ease of crossing, and allocate space for landscaping. Following the in-person open house, a survey was published online where people were able to answer questions about the trade-offs to help us better understand what mattered to most Eugenians. Public input from both the in-person event and the online survey helped inform which design alternative to move forward with. That decision was revealed at the March 2020 Preferred Alternative Open House, where we shared the design selected to move forward with, a modified version of the hybrid design alternative. As usual, all materials shared at the live event were also published on the project webpage, and feedback gathered both in person and online continued to guide staff. At this point, we all know what happened on the larger scale of events. 1 week after the Preferred Alternative Open House, direction to stay at home was given. We all took a hiatus from public events for a couple of years. But during that time, staff continued to work on the project. In partnership with the City of Springfield and with support from Lane Transit District, we submitted grant applications for federal funding for the project. In 2021, both cities were together successfully awarded $19 million in funding via the Rebuilding American Infrastructure with Sustainability and Equity, RAISE for short, grant for the project. The total cost of the project is more than the amount of funding received, so project completion will occur in phases. In Eugene, the RAISE grant will be used to 1. Build sidewalks and infrastructure for people biking. 2. Double track LTD's bus rapid transit line, the MX, allowing it to increase service frequency along its most used line. And 3. Construct 2 priority roundabouts where Franklin's intersects with Moss Street and Walnut Street. We also continue to refine the design presented at the March 2020 Open House based on input from Eugenians, transportation professionals, and stakeholder groups such as business and property owners. On February 2nd, 2023, we presented that work at an open house event packed with community members. Everything shared at the open house is posted online, and we are accepting comments on the design through email, phone calls, and our online engagement platform, Engage Eugene. The online open comment period is open until March 5th, 2023. All feedback gathered will be used to continue informing design refinement as the project moves forward into the engineering phase of design development. But first, let's take a look at the current design and how it's changed since 2020. All right, I know that was kind of fast, but don't worry, we're going to go more into it. So let's look at this section by section. We'll start with looking at the section between Alder Street and ending just shy of Onyx Street. We're going to start on the west end of the corridor and make our way east. So here, the most notable difference on the western end is that we've removed that initial western gateway roundabout that we were planning. We were originally planning on doing that western gateway because it was meant to act as a complement to another gateway that we have planned on the eastern end. So together they would have formed like a bookend on either side of the corridor to help indicate a transition into and out of the area. It was removed to lessen out-of-direction vehicular travel and impacts to property belonging to both the University of Oregon and Bushnell University. An additional change to this part of the corridor focuses on walking and biking near the mill race. In the 2020 version, there was both a shared use path and a sidewalk running parallel to the mill race. In the current version, however, due to spatial constraints, we've removed the sidewalk, but are keeping the shared use path there. Going east, the next portion of the corridor we're looking at is between Onyx and Moss. No major changes have occurred here since 2020 design. Both versions include roundabouts at Onyx, a signalized intersection at Agate, and both include a major component of the project in general, the construction of a brand new intersection where Franklin Blvd, 13th Avenue, and Moss Street come together. Currently, people leaving the Matthew Knight Arena who want to go to any of the businesses across the street, like Tracktown Pizza, Pig and Turnip, or the Hayward Inn, if they want to cross an actual crosswalk, they need to choose between the crosswalk at Agate or the crosswalk at Blvd. And there's a quarter mile in between those two. So what most people do is they just actually choose to test their luck and dash across the street instead. So that putting that roundabout intersection there will really help with that. Between 2020 and today, the only change of note that's happened in this segment is one that is actually pretty consistent throughout the entire corridor design. And that is that in the 2020 version, on the north and south sides of Franklin, for spaces for people to bike and walk, it kind of alternated back and forth between shared use paths and protected bikeways, whereas in the current version, the north side of Franklin is mostly a protected bike lane, and on the south side, it's mostly a shared use path. Continuing east, the next section looks at the area between Blvd and where Franklin starts to transition into what feels like a highway. In this area, the most notable change is the inclusion of a left-hand turn onto Blvd for traffic traveling west on Franklin. Not part of the 2020 design, we heard concern expressed from businesses and property owners about the impact that the was anticipated from removing that westbound left. So we consulted with our project engineers and determined that reintroducing the turn was a viable option. And again, spaces designed for people to walk and bike have been made more consistent, and the intersection types are largely unchanged. Villard is signalized, there is no designated crossing at Orchard, and Walnut has a roundabout. And there is that Eastern Gateway roundabout there. And lastly, in the far east of the project area, one final roundabout is planned for where the I-5 off-ramp and Riverview Street meet. Here we're proposing to close the entrance into the Laurel Hill Valley neighborhood from the I-5 on-ramp and instead make the I-5 off-ramp two-way. This will make it safer for people to bike into and out of the Laurel Hill Valley neighborhood. The design of this area has not significantly changed since that 2020 design. At this point, I'd like to discuss roundabouts. You likely noticed that there are a number of them included in the design and may be asking why. Well, that's because they're great tools for helping us to meet the project and city goals of safety and climate recovery. Additionally, they help save money for both the person traveling through them and the city at large. The tight circle of a roundabout forces people driving to slow down, and the angle of travel helps people driving better see what's around them. This results in fewer severe types of intersection crashes. We're talking about right-angle crashes, also known as T-boning, and left turn or head-on collisions. This means that 35% fewer crashes occur overall, and if a crash does happen, the chance of death or severe injury is greatly reduced due to the slower speed. It also results in a reduction in the number of collisions between people driving and people walking or biking. Roundabouts also improve traffic flow, which indirectly benefits the environment. By reducing the amount of time cars idle waiting at stop signs or signals, the amount of air and noise pollution that results from idling is reduced. It also reduces the amount of fuel consumed by an idling vehicle. Roundabouts also offer the potential for green landscaping with plants and trees. On a related note, they can also be used to display works of public art. Lastly, roundabouts save money. For the person traveling through the roundabout, the reduction in time spent idling or navigating stop-go traffic translates to money saved at the pump. And for the city, money is saved by not needing to power traffic signals or use police time to direct traffic during power outages. Now, let's talk about how people walking will be able to cross Franklin at a roundabout intersection. Here, it's important to note that currently, to cross Franklin, people walking across the boulevard need to go across 4 to 6 lanes at a time. That's a lot. But at a roundabout intersection, that crossing will be broken up into smaller, more manageable sections. Plus, we plan to introduce raised crosswalks, which will help slow vehicles and make people walking more visible. People driving will always be required to stop for people walking. But when a bus approaches, people walking will need to pause and wait for the bus to pass. So let's cross Franklin at a roundabout. First, people walking will activate a rapid flashing beacon, RFB, so that they can cross the general traffic lanes traveling in one direction, either east or west, and alert people driving to stop for them. You're likely familiar with what the RFB looks like. You've seen these around town. And then once the person walking across the general traffic lanes, they'll next approach the bus-only lane. The signal to cross this lane will rest on walk, but if a bus is approaching, it will be detected ahead of the crosswalk and automatically change the signal to don't walk. Once the bus passes the crosswalk, the driver of the bus will wait and yield to circulating traffic in the roundabout before entering it. When exiting the roundabout and re-entering the bus lane, buses will wait for people crossing Franklin as other drivers would. And then people walking across Franklin will cross the remaining general traffic lanes, traveling in the other direction. So how will people biking navigate intersections at Franklin? At signalized intersections, like the ones planned for Agate and Blvd, people biking who want to take a left-hand turn will proceed through the intersection and wait on the far corner to complete a two-stage turn. When crossing, people on bikes will have their own crosswalk in green that is separate from the crosswalk for people walking in white. At roundabout intersections, people biking will go around it using the bike facilities and the green bike crosswalks, traveling in the same direction as people driving to make turns, counterclockwise. People biking will need to look for yielding drivers when crossing side streets in Franklin in the same way that people walking will. We'll discuss the type of bike facilities being proposed in a moment, but first, I want to share this rendering of what a roundabout intersection could look like in practice. This rendering is of the intersection of Franklin with Walnut. The proposed design shows the MX line, wide sidewalks, a protected bikeway, crosswalks for people walking and biking, and green spaces. The roundabout is depicted with public art at its center, which is a possibility that we're looking into, and a truck apron that large vehicles, such as freight trucks and emergency vehicles, can mount if necessary when going around the roundabout. As for the bike facilities, we're looking into potentially using two different types, protected bikeways and shared use paths. Protected bikeways are like sidewalks for people on bikes. They use physical separation, such as the vertical plastic barriers shown in the left-hand picture, to create a space for people biking separate from the space where people drive. Shared use paths are like wide sidewalks that both people walking and biking can use and have a space that is separate from where people driving vehicles are. Where protected bikeways are designed to be used only by people biking, shared use paths are designed to be used by both people biking and walking. Our current design mostly plans for protected bikeways, depicted here in purple, on the north side of the corridor, and mostly plans for shared use paths, shown in green, on the south side. And looking ahead at what comes next, we're currently beginning the NEPA analysis process for phase 1 of the project. The design is close to transitioning from the planning stage of development to the engineering phase. That is where a lot of the more fine-tuned details will be worked out. Things like where exactly driveways and trees will be located, and the exact angle at which vehicles will approach intersections. Once the engineering phase is complete, construction will begin. At that time, care will be taken to ensure that access to businesses will be maintained. As it stands, construction of phase 1 is anticipated to be completed in 2028. And that brings us to the end of this presentation. Thank you so much for your time. I hope that this helped provide a better understanding of the Franklin Blvd Transformation Project and invite you to stay involved with it. You can visit the project website at www.eugene-or.gov/Franklin. It's shown here on the slide. To learn more about the project, sign up for the Franklin e-newsletter for project updates delivered straight to your mailbox, and use feedback features to provide feedback and comments about the project and its current design. The open comment period will be open through March 5th. After that, all feedback received both at the in-person open house and online will be used to further refine the design before it moves to engineering. You can also reach out to me directly using my contact information listed on this slide. Thank you again for your time, and goodbye.